Hi everyone. In our last 3 videos, we've been going over the basics of JavaScript. We've gone over an introduction to variables, functions, and conditionals. And in today's video, we're going to be combining those 3 concepts for our first larger scale project. Now for this project, we're going to be having the computer pick a number between 1 and 10 and then ask us to guess it. So we will give a number between 1 and 10, and the computer will tell us if we've guessed too high, too low, or gotten the right number. Now, in order for this program to work, we're going to need to be able to get input from the user by having them type in a number between 1 and 10. And getting input from a user within a Node terminal is a little bit of a complicated process, and rather than going through all the explanations of how to get this set up and going, what I've done is I've gone ahead and written that code out for you, or at least the starting code for you that will let us get input from the user. Now when we first set up our computers to start with web development, we installed Git. And so far we've been using Git as a command line terminal, but it also has numerous other features, one of which is allowing us to share and use code from other people. So before we get started, let's take a look at what folders we have in our examples folder right now. We have our folder for variables, we have our folder for functions, and we have our folder for conditionals. Now what we're going to do is we're going to type git clone and then a long URL. And the default way in Git terminal to paste text is by pressing Shift Insert. And once we hit enter here, what it's going to do is it's going to copy all the files from this repository, which is just a fancy way of saying a folder full of files. And if we type ls again, what we're going to see is we have a new folder called Intro to Web Development 4 First Project. So what we're going to do is we're going to move into that directory. And if we type ls again, we're going to see that we have one file called picknumber.js. And this is going to be our starter code to enable us to get input from the user and start working on our program. So let's go ahead and take a look at our starting code. Alright, so here we have picknumber.js open in Visual Studio Code. And you'll see we have a lot of code here already. And one thing to point out is that everything above this comment, the end of provided code, everything above here is nothing that we are going to be touching during the course of this project. And this is going to be some starting code that will allow us to get a number from the user. And there's a lot going on in here, but for now, just understand that whenever we say prompt for number, we're going to give a string, which is going to be the message that they see, and it's going to, once they put a number, it's going to store it into answer. And the one important thing right now is that whenever we use prompt for number, we're going to want to use this await keyword beforehand. And all of our functions are going to start with async. Now, this is a more complicated subject right now, and we're not going to go into that very much. But just know that all of our functions, we're going to want to have async. And anytime we use prompt for number, we're going to start with await. So if you take a look at the starting code, read through it, and try to get an idea of what's going on. And if you can't understand it, that's okay, we're going to go over it, but take some time to look through it and see if you can figure out what's going on. Alright, so we have this start function, which simply prompts for a number, and it'll say pick a number, and once the user types in that number, it's going to get stored in a variable called answer. Then we're going to console.log, you picked, and then the answer, and then we're going to end. And what end does is it's going to be a cleanup function that closes down everything that needs to be done. And so let's run this real quick and see what happens. Node picknumber.js, and it's going to say pick a number, and we're going to say 15, and it says you picked 15 and close out. Now one other thing that I did is that I wrote this code so that if you don't type in a number, it'll just default to 0 and close out. And I did this so that we don't have to do additional checking of what type of input it is, whether it was a string or a number. prompt for number will always return a number. If the user types in something not a number, it's going to default it to 0 and return it as a 0. So we only have to worry about numbers in our code. Now again, take some time to think about what all we're going to need to do in order to make our program work. And remember, we're going to have the computer pick a number between 1 and 10. We're going to have the user guess that number until they guess correctly and then close out. So one thing programmers need to be able to do, and it's a skill that we've learned over time, is to take a larger project and break it down into smaller parts. So when I think about this project, I think of 3 things that we're going to need to do. We're going to need to be able to have the computer pick a number and store it somewhere. We're going to need to provide a way for the user to guess a number, which we have provided for us. And we need to check that guess number against the computer's chosen number and provide feedback of whether we've guessed too high, too low, or the correct number. So let's start working on these one part at a time. So the first thing that we're going to need to be able to do is have the computer pick a number between 1 and 10. And we worked on something similar to that in our functions video. So what we're going to want to do is create a function, const pick number, and we're going to want to pick a number between 1 and 10 currently. So we're going to want to do const base number equals math.random, and again this is going to pick a random number between 0 and 1, some random decimal, and then we're going to const multiplied number equals base number times 10. And then we're going to return math.ceil multiplied number. And this is going to pick a number between 1 and 10. Now we're also going to want to store this value somewhere, so we're going to need a variable. So let's create a let computers number, and we'll start it at 0 for now. Because up here, we're going to say, as soon as we start, we're going to say computers number is equal to pick number. Now we can check that this works by doing a console.log computers number here. And let's comment these out real quick and just do a quick verification that it is in fact picking random numbers. Yeah, so we got a 1, a 5, an 8, and a 3. Perfect. Okay, so let's get rid of that. And you'll notice a lot of times when I'm working on larger projects or even smaller projects is once I have one piece of functionality added, I'll test it or do some simple output just to verify that it is working as we expect. Because it's easier to check that something's working in smaller pieces than to write out all of our code in one go and then check it. Because if something breaks at the end, there's going to be a lot more code to sift through. Whereas when we're just working on 5 or so new lines, it's going to be really easy, or at least easier, to try to find where the error happened. So as I add in new functionality, you'll see me doing some simple test, usually a console log, to verify that everything is working as I'm expecting. So now that the computer is able to pick a number, we're going to want to be able to ask a user to guess a number. And we do have this right here. So let's go ahead and uncomment this. And we have const answer equals prompt for number, pick a number. And what we can do here, now that we've got this, is we can test this and say if answer is greater than computer's number, then we're going to want to do something. Else if answer is less than computer's number, we're going to want to do something different. Else, and then here we picked the right number. Okay. So here let's just go ahead and say console.log you guessed too high. Then here we can say console.log, you guessed too low. And then here we're going to want to say console.log, you guessed my number. All right. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. So it'll say pick a number, and we'll say 5. And it'll say you guessed too high, but now it's getting us out of the program. And it makes sense that it's kicking us out of the program because we're only asking for the number once, and then we're ending, and then the program's done. So what are some ways that we could rewrite this in order to make this work and allow us to guess repeatedly? One way we can do this is by extracting all of this into its own function so that we can call it multiple times. So let's do const guess number, if I can spell, equals. Okay, so this gives us a basic function. And we're going to take all of this and we're going to move it over here. So we're just going to cut and paste. Now remember, when I said whenever we use await, our function also has to have that async. And so if we come down here and we do guess number and call that, let's see what happens. All right, so we're going to do node pick number again. And it's going to say pick a number, and then before we even get to do anything, it closes out. Now let's stop and think about, why do you think this might be happening? Now, the reason is not immediately apparent, but what is happening is that a guess number is an async function, and again, async functions are another topic that we're going to have a whole entire video on. But what this is saying is run this function, but also keep going. And so this end is getting called whether or not this has run. So a guess number is not waiting for anything, and end is getting called before we can actually put anything in. So we're going to want to take this and move it up here as well. And now, once we run this, pick a number, it's going to sit there and wait. If we do 5 again, oh, we guessed their number, and it ends. If we do it again, and try 5 again, we guess too high. Again, it's ending, and we don't necessarily want that. We only want to end if we guess the number correctly. So let's think about that. Where can we move that end so that when we guess the number correctly, that then and only then will it end? Well, right here, this block of code is what's being called when we guess the number correctly. So we're going to want to take this end out and paste it right here. And if we save, once we run this, if we pick a number, we're going to guess 5 again. We guess too high. But now we're just sitting here, and the program is stalled out. We can keep typing if we want, but it's not going to do anything. And the reason for that is because now when we guess number, if we guess too high or too low, it's going to console.log, we guess too high or too low, and then it's going to get to the end of the function. This is going to continue on, and there's nothing else left for it to do. We haven't called end, so we can't get out of the program, and so it's just going to sit there. And so what you can do to get out of this is press Control-C, and we're going to have to change something here. And so now what we can do, if we've guessed too high or too low, we let them know whether they guessed too high or too low, and we just have them guess the number again. And so in either case, whether you guess too high or too low, it's going to let us know, and then it's going to have us guess again. So let's see this in action. So we'll pick a number, we'll say 5. We've guessed too high, pick another number. Well, if we do 8, it's still going to be too high. But let's try something like 3. Still too high. Try 2, still too high. 1. we've guessed the number. And again, once we've guessed the number, it's going to hit end, and then it's going to close out for us. So here we have a fully functioning game where the computer picks a number between 1 and 10 and lets us guess it repeatedly until we get the answer correctly. So this is an example of using variables, functions, and conditionals together in order to make a larger project. So now that we have this done and it's working, what are some ways that we can improve on this or make it a little more interesting or complex? Now, one thing we could do is, rather than always guessing a number between 1 and 10, is we could prompt the user for what number they would like to guess for and do it that way. So let's go ahead and see how we could do that. Now, first we're going to want to be able to ask them for a number and then pick a number between 0 or 1 and that number. So down here, what we'll do is we'll do const max number equals await prompt for number. And we can say, what is the max number? And then we'll do that. And then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to be able to pass this into pick number. And then over here, we'll say max, and we'll do multiply number times max. And so now let's run this and see what happens. So what is the max number? Let's say 50 this time. And now if we pick a number between, so 10 is now too low, even though it would have been the highest number before. So let's try 30, it's too high, 20, too high, 15, guess the number. So now it's going to be able to ask the user how many numbers or what the maximum number they'd like to use is. And let me go ahead and add a space here, just so there's you notice there's no space here, just to make me feel a little bit better. So that's one quick improvement that we can do. And there's one other thing that I think we could do. What if we want to ask the player if they want to play again or not? Well, let's create a function down here, and we'll call it const play again prompt. And that's again an async function. And so now, instead of ending, we're going to want to call the play again prompt. And then down here, we can say const answer is equal prompt for number. And here, we're going to have to be able to ask them whether they want to play again or not. And I would say if they pick a 0, type 0 for no, or 1 for yes. So we can say play again, 0 for no, 1 for yes. And then again, we'll want that space. So how do we check now whether we want them to play again or not? And what do we do if they want to play again or not? So we can say if answer is equal to 1, and remember we need to do those triple equals to test whether something is equal or not. Then we say, well, they want to play again, so then we just call start, and it should run again. So once they guess the number correctly, it's going to prompt them. It's going to say play again, 0 for no, 1 for yes. If we hit 1, if the answer is 1, it's just going to call start again, and then we should end up right back here again. Otherwise, if they do anything else, we could do an else if it equals 0, but what happens if they put in 2 instead, or any other number instead? Then we're going to have an issue where the program hangs again. So let's just go ahead and call end here. So if they type in 1, then it's going to run again. Otherwise, it's going to end. So let's try this one last time. Max number, let's do 50. Pick a number, 25. It's too high. 10. It's too low. 15. And what did we do wrong here? Oh, So again, hopefully you guys saw it, but we did prompt for number, but we forgot to await it. And so it's going to ask us for the number, and then it's just going to keep going unless we say await. So now let's try this one last time. Hopefully one last time. So what's the next number? Let's do 5 just so we can test it. 2 is too low. 4, 3. Play again. 0 for no, 1 for yes. Let's do yes. What's the max number? We'll do 5 again. Nice. And then we can do 0 or anything else for that matter, and it's going to close out for us. Nice. So now what we have is an even more complex program that allows the user a little bit more flexibility because it's asking, what number would you like to guess? And we could go as high as 1,000,000 if we wanted and guess a number between 1 and 1,000,000. But that's up to the player now, what they want to do. It also asks if they want to keep playing so they don't have to keep starting up the program. Imagine every time you're playing a game, every time you win, it closes out. You have to open it up to go again. Now it'll just keep going and lets you rerun it as many times as you want until you're done. So thanks for watching. Hopefully you found working on a larger project that involves all of our concepts that we've worked on before helpful. If you have found this helpful, make sure you like and subscribe to the video. Comment down below, what did you find useful? What did you find confusing? How can I improve these videos to make them even more helpful for you? Let me know. Let's get a conversation going. But for now, I'll let you guys go. And in the next video, we'll start adding in even more concepts on this to make even more complex and exciting programs. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.